Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer on Genesis 2, the macro to micro creation narrative. Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most foundational texts in all of human history. Whether you grew up hearing the story or you're coming to it with totally fresh eyes, we're going to look at it through a really specific lens today. Think of it like a giant cinematic camera. We're starting with this massive macro shot of the entire cosmos, and then we're going to zoom all the way down into a highly specific, almost microscopic, and incredibly intimate narrative.
So it really begs the question, where does the story actually begin? In the grand scheme of the universe, it's so easy to get totally lost in the stars and the planets. But this text, it purposefully shifts our attention away from the grand cosmos and plants us, literally, right into the dirt. It brings us straight into the very localized, highly specific origins of the human story. It really grounds us.
Section 1. The Seventh Day.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Before we actually get down into the dirt, the text has to wrap up the heavens. We're told that on the seventh day, God ended the work he had made. And what exactly did he do? He rested. After all that cosmic construction, shaping the heavens and the earth and everything in them, there's this deliberate pause. The work is totally finished, and the immediate response to that finished work is rest.
And this rest, it's not just a casual break to catch his breath. The text explicitly says that God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. To sanctify simply means to set it apart as holy or to consecrate it, specifically because on that day he rested from all the work he created. It's actually fascinating to think about this from a modern cultural perspective. When you log off work on a Friday afternoon or when you're enjoying a quiet Sunday morning? The historical roots for the very concept of a weekend, a block of time explicitly carved out and protected from labor, finds its earliest expression right here in this ancient text.
Section 2. Dust and Breath. So, having established this big cosmic pause, the narrative executes that cinematic zoom I mentioned earlier. It brings us all the way down to a very empty, pre-agricultural Earth. It tells us that every plant and herb hadn't even grown yet, because it hadn't rained, and there was no one around to farm the land. Instead, we get this incredibly atmospheric setting. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Just picture that for a second. A quiet, completely barren landscape enveloped in this rising, silent mist that just dampens the soil. This is the physical environment right before the very first human is introduced. The ground is literally being prepped and made ready.
And then it happens, the creation of man. Now I want you to really notice the steps here, because it's an incredibly tactile, hands-on process. First, the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. Second, he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And third, man became a living soul. Man isn't just spoken into existence from some distant realm. He's intimately formed, literally shaped right out of that damp dirt, and then given life through a direct, close-up breath into his nostrils. The connection between the human and the earth, it literally couldn't be any closer.
Section 3. The Garden of Eden.
So okay, now we have a human. But where does he go? Well, the Lord God plants a garden eastward in Eden. Out of this ground, God makes every tree grow that's pleasant to look at and good for food. It's a localized paradise, and this brilliantly illustrates the sheer level of detail the text provides to ground the story in reality. A river goes out of Eden to water the garden, and then it parts into 4 distinct riverheads. The first is Pison, going through Havilah, which, by the way, is a land specifically noted for having good gold, bdellium, and the onyx stone. The second is Gihon, encompassing Ethiopia. The third is Hiddekel, going east of Assyria, and the fourth is the Euphrates. This isn't just some vague fairy tale realm. The text is anchoring the garden to specific landmarks, regions, and even economic resources like gold and onyx.
Section 4. The One Rule. The Lord God takes the man and puts him into the garden for a specific reason, to dress it and keep it. He's basically a caretaker. But with this responsibility comes a boundary. Right in the midst of this garden, among all the trees that are great to look at and eat from, there are 2 highly specific trees that are starkly contrasted, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, these aren't just normal plants. They represent absolute divine boundaries within this paradise.
So the crucial point is this explicit commandment given to the man. It's a really simple but incredibly high-stakes rule. The man is told he may freely eat from every single tree of the garden. Absolute freedom, right? But with one singular exception. He must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And the consequence for breaking this rule? It's absolute. It says, "In the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." Boom! The stakes of the narrative are instantly raised. We have a perfect environment, sure, but it comes with a fatal condition.
Section 5. Finding companionship.
Now, despite the absolute paradise, the rivers, the gold, all of it, the narrative zooms right back into the intimate micro-level of the man's isolation. We get this really striking realization from the divine perspective. It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. Think about that. Up to this point in the broader creation story, everything has been declared good, but here, for the very first time, something is identified as not good, and that's solitary human existence. It introduces this profound narrative tension. The man needs a companion, a partner suited specifically for him.
But the solution to this isolation isn't immediate. First, out of the ground, the Lord God forms every beast of the field and every fowl of the air. And he brings them to Adam, who is finally named here, to see what he'll call them. It's an incredible scene of discovery. Whatever Adam calls every living creature, that officially becomes its name. So he names all the cattle, the birds, the beasts. But there's a pretty melancholy result to this whole grand parade of animals. The text tells us that, for Adam, there was not found an help meet for him. Among all the vast biodiversity of the entire earth, he is still fundamentally alone.
And this leads to a dramatic, honestly almost surgical event to resolve his loneliness. The steps are incredibly specific. The Lord God causes a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. While he's sleeping, God actually takes one of his ribs and closes up the flesh in its place. Then, from that rib taken from the man, he makes a woman and brings her to the man. Notice the shift in material here? Adam was made from the dust of the ground, but the woman, she's made from the actual living bone and flesh of the man himself.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how it serves as the emotional climax of the story. Adam wakes up, sees her, and he speaks for the very first time in the entire text. He says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." The narrative tension of his isolation is completely resolved. He recognizes her instantly as his equal, his exact counterpart, made of the exact same substance as he is.
The text then zooms out just a bit to explain the foundational principles of human relationship that are established by this event. It states that, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." It defines absolute unity and partnership, and it ends on this note of complete vulnerability and calm innocence, saying, "And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." There is literally nothing hidden between them, and nothing hidden from their environment.
So here we are at the end of this incredibly detailed narrative arc. We've gone from the grand, sweeping cosmos all the way down to a mist-covered dirt floor. We've seen the creation of a man, the planting of a geographically specific paradise, the naming of the animals, and the deeply intimate creation of the first human partnership. The scene is perfectly set, but it leaves us with this massive, lingering question. With a perfect garden, a perfect new companion, and only one single rule to follow, what could possibly go wrong? It's the ultimate cliffhanger, leaving us looking right at that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deeper look at the structure and flow of the text has helped you understand it in a whole new way. See you next time.